My gun is broken. Rest in peace, my fellow friend. I'm gonna keep you. You know, you probably have been to Central Park. You have heard about Central Park, right? Now, Central Park is a very big park, and it does not have any Civil War stuff, probably because there was no Civil War up there. This is Grant Park. It takes 15 minutes to walk the entire thing. And there's a giant fortification! This is the number one thing that Central Park has missed out on, Civil War fortifications. They could have faked it, but they did not want to because they're too lazy and it's also too expensive. And here, it's just perfect. Welcome to the small little fort of Fort Walker, and this is not a show page, it's a fort. Now, Fort Walker is a small redoubt around at the end of Grant Park, which I have to recall is about the size of my backyard. But even if it's so small, it can hold a very historic spot. Now this rock was actually built in 1938. The cannon was put there in 2014 by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. Look out, America! A bunch of women are about to take over the entire nation, or secede, or do whatever. Hold up, is my mom part of that? Well, a bit of history on this exact fort, because we happen to know a lot about this one circle of mounds of dirt and rocks. If you can see, there's a bunch of rocks everywhere and cannons. It was originally a redoubt where the Confederate troops, when they decided that, you know what, let's build some fortifications. They came into Grant Park and they just set it up. It's simple. They just built this fort and they stayed in it until they died. The best thinking ever, right? But at first, this fort had no name. It was basically called Fort something. But then some major general, William H.T. Walker, died, which then somebody was like, how about let's make a memorial for him? Ta-da! Welcome to Fort Walker! Yes, it is called Fort Walker. Now, this was a small artillery fort. I mean, these stone platforms, it was supposed to make it easier to push the cannons up, and also it would be a stable ground for the soldiers to walk up and shoot from. And actually, if you look at the outside, there's this little trenches which soldiers would also be in and also shoot from. And yeah, they had a lot of bigger cannons, much bigger than that, like the ones that look like giant Godzilla cannons. The mega cannons from the Ottoman Empire, that's what it looked like. Now, this little fort was in use until the Battle of Atlanta ended, where they surrendered the fort, and the very spot that is right there, I'm like 1 foot away from it, is where the flagpole was. AKA the place where they lowered the Confederate flag, attached the surrender flag, and boom, Fort Walker was surrendered. Now, actually, Fort Walker did not look like this. There was even more stuff like stone everywhere. They had stone. They made sure that the wood in it would not rot. They even had a bunch of bronze cannons, like bronze cannon, bronze cannon, bronze cannon, false cannon. That's what they had. It looked like a real fort. They even had like about in that area a little wooden platform where they put real muskets and pistols and ammunition and gunpowder. I don't see it anymore. I wonder why. Maybe it's because holding a bunch of bronze cannons and valuable stuff isn't really the best idea. A lot. It's a terrible idea. So usually somebody stole one of the cannons, which is the cannon that was placed right there. Another thing that happened was graffiti. You see, at this time, the graffiti craze was immense. So it would be normal for somebody would pick up and be like, Well, this is definitely not a fort named after a Confederate general, and it's definitely not honoring somebody who died. I mean, just destroy it all. Oh, how would I steal something from it? And that is basically how Fort Walker became from a fort to a big circle amount of dirt and a place where people continue making graffiti on. And that is the only weapon that is left. But there are many things like the stone and the fortifications actually and the trenches at the front that are still here. So let's go check those out. Now this is a little observation deck where they would put a cannon, which was also stolen. And as you can see, they polished it very fine. It was actually much better looking a long time ago. They made sure that it looked just like the shininess of this revolver. And today, they had to wash off graffiti, and now it looks very disgusting. And that is basically the history of these stones. Now you can see the little dirt mounds. Those are used as a defensive point. Actually, the fun fact is that they used to actually carve a bit out so that they could shove the barrel of the cannon in just like any other fort. But that was a long time ago. And naturally, the soil built up and it became boring. It was also a good spot for soldiers to shoot over because, boom, now the Union could shoot their chests. But they could still shoot the head, so I don't know, I guess it's a win-win. But one thing that you gotta know about this is that something very cool is that this little road was it was the main plaza. You know, I've been to places like San Juan, they've got main plazas there. Well, this is the main plaza for this place. They would make the formations here, they would put the cannons up here using this one road. That was the main plaza, and it was the most important part in this entire small fort. But Fort Walker wasn't only confined to inside. No, their trench is outside, which gives extra protection and extra firepower. Now, something I would like to tell you all is that it was actually armed with a few 25-pound howitzers, which I would say is pretty powerful. But then they had to remove it because the power ended up launching the cannons back and killing a few soldiers. So yeah, it's justified that they removed it. But now let's take a look at the trenches, which are one, a source of extra firepower, two, an extra place for the soldiers to do it, three, a little ditch so that if the enemy goes in, then they will have to drop down into a firing pit, and you know what happens after that? They all die. Now, Fort Walker was a good fort, but the trenches really helped it to be the most powerful fort in all of Grant Park, and also the only fort in all of Grant Park. So let's go look at the trenches. This is the deepest fortification trench I've ever seen so far. Now, as you already know, it was used as extra defense. So the soldiers would peek over the crevices that you can see clearly, and then they would shoot their rounds at the enemy. And when the Union troops occupied this little trench, boom, now they need to climb up the walls. And as they climbed up, the Confederates could shoot all down on them, which would be easier because they have what Star Wars calls the high ground. And usually the high ground works, but in this case, and also in Star Wars, it did not work so well. The Union troops still went up and captured Fort Walker, although they kept it because it was named after a Confederate general who did pretty well and also did not decide to execute one of the generals that they had captured. So they kept the fort up and running, and a few years later, a bunch of people vandalized it and stole a bunch of cannons, so that's why it looks the way it is right now. Now, Grant Park is a small park, yet it still holds a big historic fortification. Now, this is actually the biggest fortification I've ever seen so far, but hopefully that's not going to stay the way because I really need to see the bigger ones. I actually had a lot of fun over here because, like, the showpades, they're cool, but you can't go in them. The other one had cannons, but it's tiny, and there were tiny cannons anyways. This one, it's a fortification. It's a fort, okay? It's a fort with a bunch of cannons, not just 2 cannons. It has 5. And that's what I like about it. It's got more than 2 cannons. And I actually won't be returning back over here, so I'm going to be making a little montage around the place, a little tour. And that is the history of Fort Walker, the only surviving fortification here in Grant Park. And oh my god, I sound like a Mr. Beast.